I'd like to state that I believe that people involved with destructive cults are intelligent as a generalization, idealistic, kind, warm, loving, creative, wonderful people. And I resent kind of blame the victim mentality that exists in the media, exists in society today, that, oh, those crazy people in Waco, they wanted to be controlled, they wanted to be raped, they wanted to have their liberties curtailed. Nonsense. These people were, in my opinion, mind-controlled by David Koresh. And I want to give you my definition of a destructive cult, which is a pyramid-structured authoritarian group with someone or some group at the top that has total power and that uses mind control techniques to recruit and indoctrinate people to be dependent and obedient. And I define mind control in terms of four components: control of behavior, control of thoughts, control of feelings, and control of information. And I'd also like to say that it doesn't matter what the belief system is, but my focus is on the methodology of practices of groups. And so a group can be a religious destructive cult, it could be a political destructive cult, it could be a therapy destructive cult, it could be a business destructive cult. If these controls of behavior, including control of sleep, food, privacy, rules and regulations, not allowing people to be alone, not allowing people to see their families, not allowing people to read letters, not of critics, of seeing people outside, inculcating thought-stopping techniques, telling people that if you have a negative thought about the leader or the doctrine or the group, that it's coming from your reactive mind, or it's coming from your fallen nature, or it's coming from Satan. And so you should chant or pray or meditate or speak in tongues to get rid of the negative thought. And when I was in the moon cult, that's what I was taught to do. I was told that if someone said something critical of Moon or the organization, to start chanting or praying in my head to get rid of Satan, to get rid of the negativity. And so I was doing a thought-stopping technique on myself. And what happens when an intelligent person is not allowed to have doubts or is not allowed to think negative thoughts? Well, all you're left with are positive thoughts. Your negative thoughts all get suppressed. What happens then? Reality testing is undermined. There's no way of testing out your environment. And so very bright, talented people can then become extremely dependent on someone who stands up and says, I have the answers. I know, you know, what the seventh seal is that no one else knows. The most universal mind control technique is phobia indoctrination. Irrational fears programmed into people's minds that if they ever leave the group, terrible things are going to happen to them. Some groups say you're going to get cancer, you're going to get AIDS, you're going to be hit by a car, you're going to get a heart attack, you're going to be possessed by evil spirits, you're going to be kidnapped and beaten and tortured by deprogrammers. That's a very common phobia of the destructive cults indoctrinating people. So that as someone who has a phobia, for example, of an elevator, they can't get in an elevator, they just freeze up, their heart races and pounds and such. Someone under mind control cannot, and such a person cannot imagine riding in an elevator safely and comfortably, as most people can. Someone under mind control in a mind control cult can't imagine leaving the group and living a happy, fulfilled life. They can only generate negative imagery and only hear negative words in their mind. And so, yes, you know, we can look in towards the Koreshians and say, yeah, they could have walked out. They could have left if they wanted to, but they didn't have the capacity to in their minds. Now, mind control as practiced by destructive cults does not erase a person's real identity, but what it does is it creates a pseudo-identity that suppresses the person's real self. And so Steve Hassan, son of Milton and Estelle Hassan, was recruited into the Moonies, and now a new identity was created where now my parents were Moon and his wife. And this new identity came to believe that the old identity, Steve, was fallen, was satanic. So his poetry got thrown away. Basketball was no longer considered to be a spiritual or a valid exercise. Seeing family and friends, going to college was no longer valid. This new cult identity was suppressing my old identity. But every single person in that cult had a real self. You know, and yet many family members and friends of those people in the compound desperately approached the FBI and said, please deliver a letter. Please let me talk with them. I'll go onto the compound. And the FBI put up a wall, an information wall, to deprive access of these people to those connections to reality, emotional connections, behavioral connections, life connections. And that was a horrible, horrible error in judgment. David Koresh's own grandmother wanted to speak with him. They wouldn't allow it. Steve Snyder, the lieutenant, number 2 person, was very close with his sister, Sue Johnson, who I've spoken with on the phone. She wanted desperately to speak with her brother. FBI prohibited it. So this dual identity concept is very important. I've read in reports where the negotiators would say that David Koresh would one moment be very rational, very, very warm and easygoing and communicative, and then all of a sudden he'd snap and he'd become this raving lunatic. And they described it as mood swings. Well, from my perspective, it wasn't a mood swing. It was an identity shift that was going. It was he was flipping backward from Vernon to David, back and forth. But the FBI didn't understand this concept, didn't understand how to elicit Vernon Howell, because it was Vernon Howell who would have come out peaceably, in my opinion, not David Koresh. So other things that I thought that the government did wrong and things they should have done.